last year in Miami, and I'm from there, and whole crowd was against me, and I was like, what on earth is going on? Like, where did these people come from?
At the 2026 Dubai Championships, Jessica Pegula, the current Dubai champion and a woman who has performed in front of boisterous audiences on 4 continents, was standing inside her hotel and was unable to fall asleep. This was not due to nerves or match preparation, but rather to the loudness of the crowd outside. From the hotel, you can hear it, particularly at night. You can hear the audience roaring. Pegula added, "You can hear it from the hotel. At night, the roar of the crowd is audible. It's amazing." The player that the supporters were cheering for did not make it to the championship game. She was already defeated. Nevertheless, there was more support for Alex Eala than for the tournament victor. She is currently in California. Additionally, Chris Eubanks, a former ADP professional, is shown live at Indian Wells.
The way that she's been able to pack stadiums and the way that her country supports her is something special.
Publicly stating that before someone is harmed, the tournament organizers should move her to a larger court. The next 48 hours at Indian Wells will give you something to talk about for years, so subscribe now to stay inside the story.
Yeah, Alex is amazing.
You must go back precisely 14 months, to January 2025, in order to comprehend what is currently going on in California. 20-year-old Alex Eala, who is rated 147th in the world, had no significance in the tennis world. A wild card level player from a nation that had never produced a player in the top 100 in the 53-year history of the WTA. That was 14 months ago. She entered the Miami Open as a wild card on March 31st, 2025, and defeated 3 Grand Slam winners in a row. Madison Keys, the current Australian Open champion, Zelina Ostapenko, the 2016 Roland Garros champion, and Iga Swiatek, the world number 2 with 5 Grand Slam victories and the most successful player in women's tennis during the previous season, were on the other side of the net in the quarterfinals. 3 years. Ayala's final score was 6-2, 7-5. The stadium changed, not merely cheered. Every row that could be seen was packed with Filipino flags. Before Swiatek arrived to the locker room, the sound had traveled from Miami to Manila. Over the next 9 months, a career did not emerge. It was an unprecedented series of firsts in Philippine sports history. The first Filipina to break into the top 50, the first Filipina to win a Grand Slam main draw match, the first Filipina to win a WTA Tour title, and the first Filipina to win the Guadalajara 125 in September. Each of the 8 distinct records was a door that had been locked for 53 years and was opened in a single year. By December 2025, Alex Eala was featured on the cover of Vogue Philippines in a joint picture session with Nike, her racket wrapped with the Philippine national flower. A player had become a symbol, tennis had become a culture, and then came the moment that made all of this clear. Rafael Nadal, who has won 22 Grand Slam championships, announced his retirement from competitive tennis in November 2025. A man returned to the practice court at his own academy after a year without using a racket in competition. He made the decision to return to the sport he had devoted his life to. He decided to work out with Alex Eala. 1 year later, he said, "It was wonderful to be back." The man who established the academy that shaped her, the man whose courts she spent 7 years honing her footwork. For her, he returned to tennis. She is the first Filipino to be seated in a WTA 1000 event, coming to Indian Wells 2026 ranked 32nd in the world and seeded 31st. Additionally, the arena is already adapting to her presence before she plays a single competitive point. However, this acknowledgement and accommodation were not given freely. One disastrous error at a time, the tennis establishment had to be pulled in its direction. The Australian Open in January 2026 marked the beginning of the pattern. Court 6 was set to host Nyla's first ever Grand Slam main draw match, a momentous occasion for the entire country. Capacity: 1,400 or so. A location designed for games in the qualifying round. The competition did not anticipate any players attending a venue this size. Lines of Filipino supporters stretched throughout the stadium. There were hundreds of people shut out. The crowds outside Court 6 were so large, according to some reports, that Australian Open authorities had to make a public announcement. In his bounces email, Renowned tennis journalist Ben Rothenberg stated, 20-year-old Alex Eala of the Philippines was crowned the most popular tennis player at the moment to the applause of the crowds who stood in vain for a chance to see her on the absurdly small stage. Court 6, the institution's reaction to that coronation, then Dubai in February 2026. During the Middle East swing, Ella was first assigned unfavorable scheduling times by the WTA Tour. There was an immediate and clear backlash. The Tennis Gazette claims that the WTA Tour ultimately made the right Alex Eala scheduling choice, with the word "finally" in that headline carrying out the necessary editorial work. It's March 2026 now. Chris Eubanks is publicly stating on live television on the Indian Wells grounds, "Hopefully, we're able to get her in a big court so everyone can stay safe around the grounds." The term safe is not ornamental. It serves as a caution. This is real-time Chapter 3 of the same institutional failure. A spreadsheet does not include the proof of what Alex Eala has created. It lives in the accounts of people who watched it happen with their own eyes and could not find adequate words for it. The numbers should come first. January 2025, 147th in the globe. March 2026, 14 months, world number 32. 48 ranking spots increased. Before her first match was even scheduled, she went from being a wild card that no one acknowledged in draw previews to becoming the focus of a live segment on Tennis Channel from inside the Indian Wells Stadium. Put yourself in Jessica Pegula's shoes at Miami. 2025, she is in the top 5, competing at home in her home state, in front of her home crowd, and in the semifinals. When she enters the court, the audience does not belong to her. Pegula stated, "I was playing against an American in Miami, but the stadium was packed with Filipinos. What in the world is happening, I thought. What was the origin of these individuals?" That match was won by Pegula. She made it to the final, and she continues to discuss the audience rather than the victory. Indian Wells was not where the army was constructed. It wasn't constructed in Dubai. Out of the 110 million people who had been waiting, it arrived fully developed. This is the case for generations to come. What the army already knew about itself was validated by the Australian Open 2026. A picture of institutional blindness and fan-based devotion in one frame, the queue outside Court 6 came to represent Ayala's star power. During the event, one of the most popular photos on the tennis internet was a Reddit post that featured the overflowing queue. She was not referred to as a potential or a budding star by one of the most reputable voices in the sport, Ben Rothenberg. He referred to her as the most well-liked tennis player. Full stop, present tense. The wait then began. Following Ayala's 3-set defeat to Alicia Parks on a court that shouldn't have been used for that particular match, there was a terrible aftermath. The same army that had shaken the walls and packed the line turned against her. Her mentions were inundated with vitriol on the internet. Kim Clijsters, a 4-time Grand Slam champion, spoke candidly about it on her Love All podcast. She received a lot of backlash from her supporters and the Philippine community after losing to Alicia Parks in a close 3-set match at the Australian Open. At such a young age, she is dealing with a lot of new things. Eala carries that weight, which isn't shown in a ranking column. There was no remark made in response to that weight. It was a timetable. February 2026 quarterfinal in Abu Dhabi. After defeating Jasmine Paolini in Doha and Dubai, she was rated in the top 6 worldwide before defeating Sarina Cirstea and making it to the quarterfinals of a WTA 1000 event. In the quarters, she was defeated 0-6 and 2-6 by Coco Gauff. The score appeared to be decisive, but what transpired throughout the game was completely different. After that, Gauff wrote to Pegula, who had just won the competition, and acknowledged that Ayala's supporters had brought attention to the sport. It told the story of her standing in her hotel room at night, unable to block out the noise, not the tournament sound, but the sound of Ayala's audience. On February 24th, 2026, while former world number 11 Steve Johnson was speaking with John Isner and Sam Querrey on the Nothing Major podcast, 3 American ATP professionals with a combined century of professional tennis experience, someone posed the straightforward question: is Eala currently more attractive than Coco Gauff and Irina Sabalenka? Johnson responded, "Yes, dude. It's insane for me. He grabbed the only recent analogy that made sense. The adolescent Brazilian who had ignited the men's circuit the previous year was João Fonseca. According to Johnson, she is having the same impact on every court as Fonseca did on the men's team in Miami last year. The court in Australia was a standing room only. Then Dubai, only standing space. It's enormous. The institution has been sluggish to grasp the commercial aspect, which Eisner emphasized. I believe many people misjudged the size of that market. On the women's side of the game, they have a start last. The plainest of the three, Quarry, said that winning a slam would be one of the biggest things in the world. 9 days ago, that conversation took place. She came to Indian Wells, where there are around 2 million Filipino Americans living in California alone. 2 days later, Paul Annacone led Roger Federer to 6 more Grand Slam victories and Pete Sampras to 14. He has more Grand Slam coaching credits than any other person in men's game history between those two individuals. He has personally witnessed what happens when a player transcends beyond a tennis outcome. This week, he was on Tennis Channel Live in Indian Wells. When the topic of Alex Eala came up, he remarked, "She has a smile that lights up a room." That is not a report from a scout. This man, who has witnessed 20 Grand Slam victories from the coaching box, tells you that the player's serve percent and forehand velocity cannot be quantified. Kim Clijsters, however, has the deeper authority stamp. There is no personal, cultural, or nationalistic motive to exaggerate the story. 4 Grand Slam victories, a former world #1 and Belgian. When she saw what Alex Eala was carrying, she sought for the most famous athlete in American sports history rather than a tennis analogy. She had to cope with living like Michael Jordan in the Philippines. She needs to be somewhat shielded from the chaos that goes along with all of that, in my opinion. Jordan Michael. Kim Clijsters, a 4-time Grand Slam champion, put that limit on a 20-year-old who was ranked 32nd in the world. She didn't use hyperbole when she said it. She warned about the pressure when she said that. Over the course of 2 weeks, Indian Wells attracts about 450,000 people. Aside from the 4 Grand Slams, it is the biggest tennis venue. 16,000 people can fit in Stadium 1. For decades, tournament planners had hosted this event without ever having to deal with a scheduling dispute stemming from a player who is too well-liked for the facilities. They currently have one to deal with. Nearly 2 million Filipino Americans live within driving distance of the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, making California the state with the highest concentration of Filipino immigrants on American soil. Ayala's rise from number 147 to seeded player has been seen by the same community. From the qualifier bubble to the main draw of the sport's top non-slam event, they now have a stadium close enough to attend in numbers commensurate with the noise they have been generating from across the ocean. The story has not yet been updated on the scoreboard. She is ranked 31st. She's not yet in the final. She hasn't achieved a Grand Slam victory. However, in press conferences, players who have won Grand Slams are the ones who get questioned about her. Ayala versus on March 6th. Diana Jastrzębska made her competitive debut at this event in the round of 64. Coco Gauff, who defeated her 0-6, 2-6 in Dubai 6 weeks ago, might face her again in the round of 32 if she advances. Then, in late March, she goes to Miami, the city where it all began in 2025, as a seeded player, defending the run that altered everything, rather than as an unknown wild card. The tennis establishment is still adjusting to its current situation. The viewers who discovered her at number 147 and kept up with every ranking update have been aware of her for a considerable amount of time. The world is coming to the same conclusion that you came to initially. Isla's first Grand Slam main draw debut came at the Australian Open, where she lost to Alicia Parks in 3 sets after winning the first set 6-0 in the chaotic Court 6. The game ought to have taken place on a stadium court. The theater where it was performed filled up so quickly that the overflow made headlines. Following the defeat, Ayala wrote on Instagram, "Here in Dubai, 3 weeks of fighting with love and pride have come to an end." She also directly quoted fellow Filipina athlete Sabrina Santamaria in a subsequent article. "Playing in front of people who identify with you is an honor. I couldn't agree more," she continued. "Being able to do what you love with love is such a blessing." She ignored the hatred. she talked about the privilege. That isn't denial. That is a 20-year-old who is aware of what she is carrying and deliberately decides to hold it with open hands rather than clenched fists. She became the first Filipino in history to be a seeded player at a WTA 1000 event when she arrived in California 7 weeks later. Jessica Pegula was unable to fall asleep due to a disturbance. For the most well-known tennis player, there is a court that Ben Rothenberg referred to as an absurdly constrained stage. After a complete year of retirement, a guy by the name of Rafael Nadal returned to a practice facility, picked up a racket, and struck like the star his academy had produced. A rating column that was at number 147 14 months ago is now at number 32, and the movement is still ongoing. Alex Eala didn't simply show up at the WTA Top 32. She created something inside a sport that did not have room for her until she made room for herself, ignited a diaspora, rewired a scheduling discourse, and made a generational authority figure reference Michael Jordan. She was placed on Court 6 by the institution. The Army attended Court 6, and now Chris Eubanks is standing inside Tennis Paradise, live on television, pleading with the organizers to provide her with a court large enough to prevent injuries. The pivotal match in Indian Wells 2026 has not yet taken place. However, the sport is already posing the appropriate question. Is this tournament large enough to accommodate her belongings? This is the question for everyone who is currently watching. Please enter your response below. In 2026, will Alex Eala prevail in Indian Wells? If she succeeds, will it be the most memorable event in Philippine sports history? From now on, the stakes compound is present in every competition she competes in. The Army becomes louder with each match the institution mishandles. March 6th marks the start of Indian Wells' next chapter. You already know that this is the point at which the entire arc has been building if you have been following the story since Miami 2025, number 147, the Swiatek upset, and the Court 6 Quetzales. The next 48 hours at Indian Wells will give you something to talk about for years, so subscribe now to stay inside the story.